At 2:17 in the morning, the emergency call ended without a goodbye. The line went silent while the operator was still speaking. When police arrived, the house was already locked from the inside, every window sealed, and the man inside was no longer alive. What made the case different was not the death itself. It was the document found on the kitchen table, stamped and signed by the Vatican, authorizing an exorcism that had already begun. According to church records, the case began 9 months earlier in a rural parish in northern Italy, far from tourist routes and modern hospitals. The subject was a 34-year-old man named Luca Rinaldi. He worked as a restorer of old churches, a quiet profession that kept him alone for long hours among decaying altars, collapsed crypts, and sealed sacristies. Colleagues later described him as reserved, deeply focused, and emotionally flat, but never unstable. The first signs were not supernatural. They were subtle changes that could be explained away. Luca began missing scheduled restorations. He complained of severe insomnia and headaches that felt, in his words, like pressure from the inside. His doctor diagnosed stress and prescribed medication. It did nothing. Neighbors reported that Luca stopped attending Mass, something he had never missed. He grew thin. His speech slowed, as if he were choosing words carefully to avoid something hidden beneath them. When asked about his work, he gave short answers and avoided eye contact. There were no outbursts, no violence, nothing dramatic enough to alarm anyone. The first documented incident occurred during a routine restoration of a sealed chapel beneath an abandoned monastery. Church maintenance logs show that Luca was assigned to clean and catalog damaged iconography. After 6 hours without contact, co-workers entered the chapel and found him sitting on the stone floor in total darkness. The lights were functional. He had turned them off himself. Witnesses later reported that Luca did not respond when his name was called. His eyes were open, fixed on the far wall, where no paintings remained. When touched, he flinched violently and whispered a phrase none of them recognized. Audio recordings taken later confirmed it was not Latin, nor any known regional dialect. Medical evaluation followed. Neurological scans were normal. Toxicology reports were clean. A psychiatrist noted dissociative symptoms and suggested depersonalization disorder. Luca did not resist treatment. He complied with everything, but his condition continued to deteriorate. According to his sister, the nights were the worst. Luca began waking at exactly 3:12 a.m. every night, without exception. He would sit upright in bed and remain motionless for hours. If spoken to, he reacted as if startled, sometimes repeating the last word he heard in a flat, distorted tone. He began scratching symbols into the wooden frame of his bed. They were not symbols he recognized, yet he reproduced them perfectly each time. Audio recordings from the home reveal a low murmuring during these episodes. Investigators later confirmed that the sound was not Luca's normal speaking voice. The frequency was lower, strained, as if forced through a body that did not fit it properly. The family returned to the church only after medical professionals exhausted their explanations. At first, the parish priest refused involvement. Notes from his journal state that he believed the case to be psychological and potentially dangerous to escalate. He recommended continued treatment. The turning point came during a blessing of the house, performed reluctantly and without ritual. As the priest recited the prayer, Luca began bleeding from the nose and ears. There was no physical contact. The priest stopped immediately. He later reported an intense sensation of being observed from behind, though he was alone in the room with Luca. That night, the priest contacted the diocese. What followed was a slow, bureaucratic process. Church protocol demanded evidence, testimony, and repeated evaluation. Luca was examined by 2 additional psychiatrists and a neurologist appointed by the diocese. All reports concluded the same thing. No diagnosable condition explained the totality of symptoms. According to official correspondence, approval was escalated only after Luca demonstrated what the records describe as reactive aversion. During a controlled prayer session, he reacted violently to a sealed relic placed nearby, despite being blindfolded and unaware of its presence. His heart rate spiked beyond safe levels. He began speaking in a structured, fluent language he had never studied, referencing personal details about the attending clergy that were later verified as accurate. At this stage, the Vatican authorized a conditional rite. The assigned exorcist was Father Matteo Greco, a man with over 20 years of experience and a reputation for caution. His notes emphasize restraint, observation, and the avoidance of theatrical escalation. He insisted on relocating Luca to a secured residence owned by the church, monitored but not restrained. The first night Father Greco spent in the house, he did not sleep. He later wrote that the walls produced a low rhythmic sound, not loud enough to be called noise, but persistent enough to be felt. At exactly 3:12 a.m., Luca began screaming from the upstairs room. When Father Greco entered, Luca was standing at the center of the room, barefoot on the cold stone floor, his head tilted slightly to one side. His eyes were open, but unfocused. He spoke calmly, addressing the priest by his full name and title, then recited a passage from Father Greco's private ordination vow, a document never made public. The priest ordered the room cleared and began the first prayers of containment. As he spoke, Luca smiled for the first time in months. The smile did not belong on his face. Witnesses later described it as strained, as if the muscles were being pulled into place by something unfamiliar with human expression. Father Greco noted that Luca's pupils were dilated far beyond normal limits, reflecting light unevenly, as though each eye were responding to a different stimulus. The initial prayers produced no visible reaction. Luca remained still, listening. When Father Greco invoked the authority of the church, Luca interrupted him mid-sentence and corrected his Latin. The correction was precise, flawless, spoken in a voice that no longer carried Luca's natural cadence. At 3:29 a.m., the temperature in the room dropped sharply. Instruments placed there for monitoring registered a sudden decrease of nearly 10 degrees. There were no open windows, no mechanical explanation. Breath became visible in the air. Father Greco ordered the prayers stopped. In his report, he emphasized that this was not fear. It was strategy. Whatever was present was not reacting blindly. It was waiting. Over the next 3 weeks, controlled sessions were conducted daily. No formal exorcism was attempted. Luca was interviewed, observed, and tested. Between episodes, he appeared exhausted, confused, and deeply ashamed. He apologized repeatedly for things he could not remember doing. He begged Father Greco not to leave him alone at night. Sleep deprivation worsened his condition. Luca reported dreams that continued after waking. He described standing in places that felt ancient and empty, hearing voices that spoke without sound. When asked to elaborate, he became distressed and refused to continue. The first physical injury occurred on the 21st day. During a routine evaluation, Luca collapsed without warning. Medical staff rushed to assist, only to be thrown backward as his body stiffened unnaturally. According to video footage, his spine arched beyond normal range, lifting his torso off the bed. His jaw dislocated audibly as he began to scream. The scream lasted 11 minutes. Throughout the episode, Luca's vital signs fluctuated violently, yet he did not lose consciousness. When Father Greco began emergency prayers, Luca's voice split into overlapping tones. Audio analysis later revealed 2 distinct vocal patterns speaking in alternation, sometimes finishing each other's sentences. At the climax of the episode, Luca turned his head slowly toward the camera and spoke a sentence that ended all doubt among the clergy present. He identified the private childhood trauma of a nun in the room, something never recorded, never confessed. The nun collapsed immediately. The session was terminated. That night, Father Greco formally requested full Vatican authorization for the rite of exorcism majoris. Approval came 48 hours later. Church correspondence shows that the decision was not unanimous. Several officials warned that Luca's physical condition might not survive the rite. Father Greco responded with a single sentence in his final request. He will not survive without it. The rite was scheduled for the following week. Preparations were extensive. The residence was sealed, windows reinforced, audio and video recording devices installed in every room. Medical staff remained on standby, though instructed not to interfere unless Luca's heart stopped. A second priest was assigned to assist. He withdrew the night before the rite, citing what he described as persistent intrusive thoughts that did not feel like his own. On the morning of the exorcism, Luca was calm. He ate breakfast. He thanked the staff. He asked Father Greco if his mother had been told what would happen. When the priest hesitated, Luca nodded slowly, as if he already knew the answer. The rite began at 11:42 a.m. At the first invocation, Luca's body reacted violently. Restraints were applied, though later analysis suggests they served little purpose. His voice emerged immediately, clear and composed, mocking the rhythm of the prayers. When holy water was applied, Luca laughed. The sound echoed unnaturally, resonating beyond the limits of the room. 12 minutes in, the voice changed. Gone was the mockery. What replaced it was anger, sharp and focused. The entity began to bargain. It offered information, confessions, secrets. Father Greco did not respond. He continued reading. At 27 minutes, Luca's breathing became labored. His skin turned gray. Medical staff moved closer, but Father Greco ordered them back. The room filled with a pressure described by witnesses as crushing, as though the air itself had weight. Lights flickered. Recording equipment malfunctioned intermittently. One camera captured Luca lifting his head and staring directly into the lens. He smiled again. Then he spoke a name. It was not Luca's name, and it was not Father Greco's. The name belonged to no one present, yet Father Greco reacted immediately. His hands tightened around the ritual text, and for the first time since the rite began, his voice faltered. Later testimony confirmed that the name spoken was that of Father Greco's predecessor, a priest who had died decades earlier during an unrecorded exorcism that never reached Vatican archives. At that moment, Luca's restraints snapped. Metal buckled inward, not outward, as if compressed by force rather than pulled apart. Luca rose from the bed without bending his knees, his body lifting several inches above the mattress. Medical monitors spiked wildly. His heart rate exceeded measurable limits, then dropped without warning. The assisting clergy began praying aloud, voices overlapping in panic. Father Greco ordered silence. He resumed the rite alone. According to the official transcript, Luca began to weep. Tears streamed down his face, his voice cracking as he begged for the prayers to stop. He spoke in his natural voice, pleading, apologizing, saying he could feel something moving inside him, something tearing its way upward. Father Greco hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. Then the voice returned. It accused the priest of pride. It accused him of doubt. It spoke calmly, slowly, as if savoring every word. It described the room in detail that cameras later confirmed was accurate, including angles and blind spots no human observer could see from Luca's position. At 42 minutes, Luca vomited a thick, black fluid that coated the floor but evaporated within seconds, leaving no residue. Air samples taken later found no trace of any substance. The smell, however, lingered for hours. Father Greco continued. Witnesses reported a sound like distant breathing, echoing through the walls. Not coming from Luca, from everywhere at once. The temperature dropped again, this time unevenly, creating cold pockets that moved across the room. Then Luca spoke softly. He said he could see something standing behind Father Greco. The priest did not turn around. At 56 minutes, Luca's body slammed back onto the bed with enough force to crack the wooden frame. His eyes rolled back, showing only white. Blood began to seep from his mouth, slow and dark. Medical staff shouted warnings. Father Greco raised his voice, reciting the final commands of the rite. The entity screamed, not through Luca's mouth, but through the room itself. Audio equipment recorded frequencies low enough to cause nausea and disorientation among the staff. One camera fell from the wall without being touched. Then, abruptly, everything stopped. Silence. Luca lay motionless. His breathing was shallow but present. His heart rate stabilized. The oppressive pressure vanished as suddenly as it had arrived. Father Greco collapsed to his knees, exhausted, whispering the closing prayers. Medical staff rushed forward. Luca opened his eyes. They were normal. He asked for water. Against protocol, he was given a sip. He swallowed with difficulty, then smiled faintly and thanked them. Father Greco approached slowly, searching Luca's face for any sign of deception. There was none. The Vatican declared the rite successful. Luca was kept under observation for 72 hours. No further incidents occurred. He slept peacefully for the first time in months. He spoke clearly, remembered nothing of the rite, and expressed relief that the nightmares had stopped. On the fourth day, Father Greco signed the release. Luca returned home. According to phone records, he called his sister that night. The conversation was brief. He told her he felt lighter, that the house felt quiet again. He said he was finally alone. At 2:17 a.m., the emergency call was placed. The operator later testified that Luca sounded confused, frightened, and short of breath. He said there was someone in the house, but he could not see them. He said the walls were making noise again. He said something had followed him. Then he stopped speaking. When police forced entry, Luca was found seated at the kitchen table. There were no signs of struggle, no visible injuries. The cause of death was listed as cardiac failure induced by extreme stress. On the table was a single sheet of paper. It was not part of the original documentation. It bore the Vatican seal, and it was dated 3 days after the exorcism. The document was addressed to Father Matteo Greco. It was brief, no explanations, no apologies, only a formal acknowledgement that the rite had been completed under conditional authority, followed by a final line written in different ink than the rest of the text. Residual presence cannot be excluded. Father Greco received the document 2 days after Luca's death. According to those close to him, he read it once, folded it carefully, and placed it inside his breviary. He did not speak about the case again. The official church position concluded that Luca's death was unrelated to possession. Medical records supported stress-induced cardiac arrest. The exorcism was archived, classified, and sealed, but the recordings told a different story. During a routine audit of stored footage months later, a technician noticed something unusual. In the final hours of the exorcism recording, after the room had gone silent, after Luca appeared calm and lucid, one camera continued to capture audio. At exactly 3:12 a.m., while Luca was still under observation, a sound could be heard. It was faint, rhythmic, identical to the low breathing reported on the night Father Greco first stayed in the house. The sound lasted for 14 seconds. It did not come from Luca. Further review revealed something else. In the last clear frame before the camera malfunctioned, a shadow passed across the wall behind Father Greco. It moved against the direction of the light source. Its outline did not resemble a human form. The footage was flagged and removed from the archive. The technician who reported it resigned shortly afterward, citing health reasons. Father Greco submitted his final report 6 weeks later. In it, he wrote that exorcism is not an ending but a separation. He noted that the rite does not destroy, but expels, and that expulsion assumes there is somewhere else to go. He requested a revision of classification standards for successful cases. The request was denied. According to parish records, Father Greco requested a transfer the following year to a remote monastery with no assigned exorcism duties. He died there quietly in his sleep less than 5 years later. Those who cleaned his quarters found his breviary on the bedside table. Inside, folded carefully between the pages, was the same Vatican document. There was something else written on it now. A single line, added in pencil, in Father Greco's handwriting. It was never bound. The Rinaldi house was sold 6 months after Luca's death. The new owners reported unexplained sounds at night, always around the same time. Breathing, movement inside the walls, pressure in the air that made sleep impossible. No further investigations were authorized. According to church records, the case remains officially closed, but the seal on the file has been broken more than once. And each time it is opened, The final page is found out of place, as if it has been recently handled. As if something is still waiting. The final page contains no prayers. It is a log sheet, meant to remain blank unless further action is required. According to archivists who later spoke under anonymity, the page shows repeated impressions, as if someone pressed down with a pen again and again without ink. Indentations form shapes that resemble the same symbols Luca carved into his bed frame months before the exorcism. Those symbols do not appear anywhere else in church records. What troubles investigators most is the timeline. The pressure marks on the page are recent. Paper analysis confirms they were made years after Luca's death. When questioned, the archivists insisted the file had not been accessed during that period. Security logs showed no entries, no authorized handling, no anomalies, and yet the page had changed. The Rinaldi house no longer has occupants. After the second family left, the property was listed and withdrawn repeatedly, each time following the same pattern. Complaints of insomnia, headaches, a sensation of being watched from behind. One tenant reported waking at 3:12 a.m. to find the kitchen light on and a single chair pulled out from the table. No one was ever found inside. Local police dismissed the reports. The house remains empty. As for the emergency call, the recording was reviewed one last time before being archived. In the final seconds, beneath the operator's voice, a second sound can be heard. Low, controlled, breathing that does not match Luca's gasping pattern. Audio experts confirmed it was closer to the microphone than Luca was, closer to the phone. According to Vatican protocol, an exorcism that ends in death is to be examined for procedural failure. In this case, the review board concluded there was none. Every step followed doctrine. Every prayer spoken correctly. The only irregularity noted was timing. The rite was ended at 12:41 p.m. The presence returned at 2:17 a.m. There is no official explanation for the gap. Only Father Greco's final note remains, written in the margin of his personal journal, never submitted, never intended to be read. It learned the prayers. The journal ends there. No closing blessing, no farewell, just an abrupt stop, as if the writer had been interrupted. And somewhere between sealed files, abandoned houses, and broken sleep, the record of Luca Rinaldi remains what it was stamped to be. Approved, completed, and, according to the last page that refuses to stay still, unfinished.